Welcome to Dev Interrupted. I'm your host, Andrew Ziegler. And today on the show, we're sitting down with Martin Woodward, the VP of Developer Relations at GitHub, and the sixth person to ever use GitHub Copilot. It's going to
Ooh.
be a really cool conversation. But first, joining me for this week's news segment is Erica Dietrich. And Erica, I've been following your tech content on LinkedIn all year. You were DevRel at Cisco and now you're independent, all while the AI revolution is flipping everything upside down. I've been following your
Mhm.
videos, your posts, because you're so spot on about how folks are adapting and using this new technology. It's been really fun, I just want to say, to follow your journey. So thanks for being here with us. And we're excited to tap into your perspective.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great. Well, on Dev Interrupted, we always start with the news segment. And so here are some of the things from this week's news cycle that we've been looking at and reading. The first one is GitHub CEO stepping down. That was a big story, but
Mm.
also the launch of GPT-5 from OpenAI. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We found a fun article about a productivity hack for to-do lists that's deceivingly simple. And I found a thread about Claude on GitHub that you're definitely going to want to check out. It's a good laugh. And last but not least, we're looking again at MCP. We've been covering MCP quite a bit on Dev Interrupted, and we're applying some lessons about engineering fundamentals. So, Erica, let's dive in. I think the first one that we should touch on, though, is definitely the OpenAI GPT-5 release that came out just this in this most recent week. And when OpenAI unveiled it, it was a pretty hotly discussed topic. Immediately, folks ran to go try it out.
Right.
I'm wondering, were you one of those folks? What did you think of the announcement and when it came out the door?
Well, I wouldn't say, like, I run, I'd say I, like, sauntered. But
Yeah.
I think that's because, even as an AI enthusiast, I feel like we get into these cycles where, there's a lot of AI hype from CEOs that doesn't necessarily match the execution, right? So I'm a little bit more of a skeptic as time goes on. And I feel like we really saw that with GPT-5, right? Like, Sam Altman was, like, really hyping it up. There was that
Hmm.
joke about how he was posting the Star Wars Death Star, like, "Oh, this is gonna be next level," and people were like, "Do you know that the Death Star blows up?" Like, and it just feels like a metaphor for, well, like, how people actually felt about this.
I love that. That was a fun post, a fun reaction from from everybody. And I think that the you're so right about approaching it with some skepticism. It takes a big idea to pull a huge execution like that forward. So I understand the ambition and definitely the vision of the folks on the top. But us down here on the bottom, trying it out and applying it, what I did is I took GPT-5 and I ran back to some of my workflows that I had built in Zapier, some of the benchmarks that I had done before on my own local device and plugged it in. And when I wasn't timing out on the API because everyone else was doing it too, I did get some pretty cool results. So I will say though, I've seen a lot of mixed reactions from folks. I know a
Mhm.
lot of our listeners, readers have as well. Folks that there's been a lot of backlash about the GPT-5's new like how it talks to you and almost perceived personality, which I thought was
Yes.
really interesting because we recently had Dr. Tatiana Mahmood of Wayfound on the pod, and she talked about sycophancy in AI and how it's just trying to please you with language. And so the sudden change in language is jarring for folks. It really points out how people are perceiving this kind of technology.
Well, people are treating AI like a person. I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe not as much from a developer perspective, I'm not sure about that, but
But some
but,
folks
um
are. There's definitely people and maybe in the tech world, but then also in the non-tech world who maybe have less familiarity with how it
Right,
works,
right. So
who do
there's kind
see
of both
perceive
sides
it.
of it. Like, how do I feel about this quote unquote person or personality I'm interacting with? And then also, how can I trust this person that feels completely different, you know?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I'm gonna continue to try it out. If folks, if you're listening, if you've been experimenting with early GPT-5 stuff, I'd love to know. So drop a comment, wherever you're listening or reading this. And one of the next things I do want to jump to because it was another really big item of the week, was the CEO of GitHub, Thomas Donkey, announcing his resignation from GitHub. And this was a huge announcement, made waves all across the developer community because GitHub is the ubiquitous place for your developers to come together as a Git forge. So it's established itself as a market leader within the source control industry, and it's like a major player within now the AI revolution with Copilot. it's also tied to our guest today. So this was a major piece of news to come out. And you can read, we're going to include a link to his goodbye message that he posted on GitHub about his journey there. It was really a great insight into how much GitHub had evolved during his tenure there. But what stood out to me the most is why he's leaving. He's leaving to be a founder again. He's found that
Yes.
love and that passion of building and creating something new. And I think this is something that is really universal in tech right now. You're getting a lot of folks who were building and hacking things 20, 30 years ago, suddenly playing and building and hacking things all over again and starting new ideas and building new stuff. And it's really cool to see that the CEO of GitHub is engaged in that same way. So I'm excited to see where his journey goes. Erica, what do you think of this one?
No, I feel the same way. I mean, it's surprising, but honestly, I was like, bravo, I respect it,
Same.
right? Like,
Yeah.
and then also like being there under his leadership, right? Like coming up with GitHub Copilot and seeing that launch, and then just being like, I'm out. Like, I'm bored here. I'm gonna go start something new.
That means there's
Um,
really something to it, right?
Right, and then I saw that there was some speculation too about like, oh, well, maybe it has to do with things going under core AI, but as an
Mm.
engineer, I'm like, I don't know. I think maybe it was just like trying to scratch the itch.
Yeah, it's like impossible to gaze in and really know, right? But
Right.
I do think I see the same opportunity as him about building and being a builder again. So
Yeah.
it'd be really cool to see what comes out of that. And speaking of building things and staying organized along the way, you can't build things unless you make a list of things you got to do it. And I read this
Unfortunately.
really fun, I read this really fun article this week about trying every single possible to do app. This is from Ali Reza Bashiri, and this was an article that ranked on Hacker News because lots of folks resonated with it. Let me set the premise for you. He tried it all. Notion, Todoist, Things 3, OmniFocus, Asana, Trello, Any.do, TickTick. If you are a task management addict like me and also this writer, then you are familiar with many of those tools. But after a year of productivity app hopping, he was just back to the basics. And you know what he landed on? A text file. That's that's
Yep.
that's what this article is about. It's about, the best task management system is a text file. And I will say that I have actually a lot to say on this, but I'm going to have to reserve myself because
Oh
I
no.
have actually iterated myself into the same corner. I read this article and basically completely identified with the author, which is why I even bring it up here about why you ultimately come back to like a text file. Mine is a markdown file. You make like a daily list of your meetings and your tasks, and you just keep a daily note. And
Yeah.
what's been really cool is adopting that for the last several years. I have a repository of every single day of my life and the things
Ooh.
I've done, which was something I didn't have before. And the fact that it's in a plain text, like text or markdown, which is what I use,
Mhm.
it sits at this perfect intersection of human and machine readable that is really fascinating for a lot of use cases. So, in the past, you wouldn't ever build your own to-do app because why would you spend the time and energy to build and maintain one of those when there's a zillion? You need to just find one of them. But now, like AI generated code, personalized software, disposable tools, idiosyncratic, apps. It's like imagine building your own app that sits on top of the text file, your own personal dashboard. A lot of cool ideas that can come out of this one.
I don't know though. I feel like isn't that like a core memory of everyone like eventually coming up with their own idea for a to-do app? Like I could do it better, or like it's missing this crucial feature. I feel like we've all been through that moment. But okay, and I'm kind of curious, what is a task management addict? Like, are you addicted to accomplishing tasks? Are you addicted to like color coding? I'm like really curious
Oh
here.
yeah, let's really split the hairs on that because it actually is more of an obsession around the organization of it. I'm a very
Okay.
organization driven person, so I love finding that way of organizing my thoughts and my tasks and labeling them. So and along the way, you develop a lot of personal rules. You should see my Asana board. The folks who have to
I
work
feel
with
like
me,
I
I
could
have
learn
I have an
something from you.
emoji. I have an emoji coded system. Kelly Vaughn, our past news segment goes on here. We joked about the same thing about our task management hacks and stuff, and
Uh-huh.
maybe this needs to become a more long form discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I sit on the opposite side of the spectrum where like I'm looking for just enough organization to not devolve into chaos.
What's that like?
It's real difficult. It's a matter of starting with a new tool and then just completely forgetting it exists. That's fun.
Oh, classic.
Going through and meticulously detailing every particular task, not even important task, right? And thinking that I'm going to somehow be more productive. But, along the same vein, right? Like I've kind of do a mix of, at this point. calendar blocking, just I plan a few days ahead. I calendar block because if it's not happening at a
Huge.
certain time, and then
It's not
also
happening ever. Mhm.
uh, not to out myself, but pen and paper because I say, hey, I'm getting these 3 things done today,
Mhm. Write
right?
them down right here. I got
Right. I mean,
my pad, I got my pen.
it's kind of
Yeah.
like your eyes are bigger than your stomach when it comes to food. Like same thing when it comes to like what you think you're going to accomplish in a day. It never happens. I mean,
That
unless it's really easy, right?
that's so spot on. I do the time blocking thing too. I've been doing that for a little while, and I find that really good for just, like, actually getting stuff done.
Exactly.
It's great to know, we sit on opposite ends of the organization world, but, we do still work towards the same stuff at the end of the day,
Right. I just
so
decided that I'm going to get less done because I just can't be organized to have this like meticulous, like Tetris style,
I get it.
organization. Yeah.
Speaking of Tetris style, or actually, I don't even know how that would have to do with anything. But we're gonna transition into the next one, which is actually a thread that I found on GitHub that
Uh
I
huh.
thought was really fun. This trended on Hacker News, and it's someone filing a bug on Claude saying that it's a bug that Claude says you're absolutely right about everything, and then cites a bunch of use cases where some of them are really comical, where like it didn't even say anything that could possibly be right and Claude
Uh
is like,
huh.
"You're absolutely right." So, obviously, our listeners, can probably imagine where this is going. The GitHub thread is very long and full of comments of people saying, "You're absolutely right," which just turned into a giant meme, basically, in the programmer or in the developer community. But what was so fun is that then out of all of those responses came actual genuine insights about how folks were interacting with it, why it mattered to them, why you cared, like, and also, some actual deeper analysis at some of the system prompt rules for Claude that might cause
Mm.
it to be a little over rotated on the word absolutely, which was a fun
Hmm.
tidbit. Along the way, though, there's like a zillion memes, a bunch of funny ones. I'll probably make sure one gets in the newsletter. So go check out this fun thread. Because remember, GitHub, like we talked about at the beginning, it's a huge network. Everyone's there. GitHub is a social network for developers at the end of the day. So when it's fun to see these really genuine things like pop up that are just like fun and people are engaged with a tool and just hacking together.
Yeah. No. And I feel like on the one hand, like the internet is so cruel that I'm kind of like, oh, it's so nice that you like, absolutely, absolutely, like, thank you. But on the other, it kind of comes back to the comment about like personalities of AI, right? It's about trust and credibility. And if someone's always saying you're absolutely right, I like, can I trust this person, especially as an engineer? Like, how often as a developer are you're absolutely right? You know what? Let's trust you and just to do everything you say. That never happens. There's always skepticism and arguing. You're right. So
Mhm. It's like,
anyway,
I associate, like, having that senior engineering mindset with not wanting to sugarcoat everything
yeah,
and
exactly.
setting the realistic expectations. I would rather Claude say that I'm not absolutely right if there is uncertainty or if it hasn't even looked deeper, you know?
Is there
So,
ever an absolute? I mean, in
is there
engineering,
ever
is
an
there ever
absolute?
yeah.
And especially when you bring LLMs in the mix, no, there can't be an absolute. So,
Ooh, yeah.
ooh, yeah. So, more to reflect on there. The fun thread, go check it out, y'all. Kind of continuing on the same trend of engineering and folks adapting to this new kind of technology and usage and what we're learning along the way. There was a really cool article that I read from Julian Simon about why MCP's disregard for many years, 40 years of RPC best practices, will ruin enterprises. He uses the term burn enterprises. Pretty strong language in terms of to set the tone for you here, like what he means is the subtitle is "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." And the thesis of the article is that we're repeating the same mistakes from when we brought things like APIs and stuff into the enterprise and brought them to scale and brought them to the
Mhm.
fingertips of millions, right? It changed the game on what mattered and what was insecure and what the stakes were, especially as use cases became more and more sensitive. So in this case, RPC, remote procedural call, it's a way of interacting with remote servers. It's an evolution of using like API technologies for computing systems to talk to each other, and it's an evolution technology that had to happen to provide us a level of security that enterprises need. The same thing is happening with MCP and AI that I've noticed. We've been following the MCP story a bit about it being a new technology, folks adapting it and using it. But what does it mean to productize MCP and take it to the market? What is a
Mhm.
secure MCP? We have a lot of like things that we're looking at right now with remote MCP servers. Like, is that the model? Like there's a lot of ways of really splitting it. Because at the end of the day, if you have a almost like it's effectively like a binary on your local computer that's running under the hood of an LLM conversation, so it can interact with your conversations. Things within that are obviously accessing APIs and endpoints that are secured with maybe things like your tokens or API keys. So there's a lot of sensitive data there. So this article really kind of goes down the road of like, what did we learn when we tried to take insecure stuff to enterprises? Stuff had to burn. It was really bad. We built this better, more secure system. And then
Mhm.
boom, MCP pops up. And here we are dragging ourselves into that same kind of disaster zone. And this is kind of Julian waving his hand saying, don't do that. So Erica,
Right.
what did you think of the takeaways from this one?
Well, I was gonna say, I actually just got back from Black Hat and DEF CON, which are 2, like, major cybersecurity conferences, right? And I'm on the developer side of talks there. And you mentioning this article, I mean, it just felt like flashback, like PTSD flashbacks of every single freaking talk I've been to, which is basically the fact that, we can't decide what security means from a developer perspective, and also to prioritize it, right? Like, we just wanna shove things onto market all the time without actually caring about security. I mean, so I think my main comment here is like, what have we learned? Like, what is the root cause here? What have we learned? Because it just feels like we're repeating history constantly.
Yeah, it's really cool that you were there, and getting those insights too. I would be very curious to know, and from you, and also maybe from like our more security-minded listeners about what the security community thinks of MCP and how they're being adopted. Because
Mm.
I myself, as someone who's more not in that world, like I have my reservations. So I could imagine the kind of
Oh,
reservations
yeah.
someone more informed than me would have. You know.
That they have lots of thoughts about developers.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll have to tap into some of that and get more
Right,
of that
right.
security mindset here. But, this has been really fun to run through the news with you. A lot actually happened in the last week, and we got a really cool interview coming up right after this. So, everyone, thanks for sticking around for our news segment here with Erica. And Erica, you can follow her on LinkedIn. We're going to include links to make sure that you can check out her content as well. So make sure you give her a follow, and maybe we'll have her back in a future segment to do more of
Ooh,
these. Yeah, wouldn't that be fun,
I
Erica?
passed. Yes.
Yeah. You passed. You got the invite back. So, that's it's great. Stick around everybody because like I said at the top, just a moment we're going to sit down with Martin Woodward, VP of Developer Relations at GitHub for a really interesting conversation on AI, revolution engineering. Stick around. Today, we're diving deep into the future of collaborative engineering with Martin Woodward. And Martin's the VP of Developer Relations at GitHub. He's actively shaping the tools that are defining tomorrow's engineer, coming out of Microsoft Build's Copilot announcements and more. And Martin recently delivered the opening keynote about the AI accelerated enterprise at GitHub Galaxy. His talk, which we'll include in the show notes, and I really enjoyed watching it from beginning to end, it dives into how AI is accelerating all steps of the development process and the things that teams can do today to shift into the new workflows of tomorrow. So, Martin, I'm really excited to unpack this with you. It's top of mind for so many of our listeners, and I can't think of a better person to go to and ask for some of the insights about where this is going. So, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's always good to chat with a fellow nerd about where we are and where we're going.
I couldn't say it better myself. And so let's go into the shift that we're talking about in development. And before your recent keynote at GitHub Galaxy, there was a major announcement at Microsoft Build around autonomous Copilot agents that can now tackle issues, run commands, edit files, open PRs, and tackle issues on GitHub and do it in the platform all on their own, operating in a way that's more removed from developer workflows that we've seen in the past. So what do you think this means for the future of software engineering as we know it now?
Yeah, it's worth saying what we did there was it was the GitHub coding agent, Copilot coding agent.
Yeah.
And what we are doing is we added, we started off with Copilot where it was sort of autocomplete, and it gave you suggestions, but kind of it had 200 milliseconds to give you those suggestions. And so there's a limit into how much kind of thought it can put into that, how much reasoning can go into that before it gives you a suggestion back. Then we kind of added chat, and then the chat, when you're doing a chat interaction, you can wait a few more seconds before you start to respond, and it still feels natural. And then over time, we've moved to where we're at now in, say, something like VS Code or IntelliJ or something, where you have an agent mode. So you can go in and you can say to, inside of your editor, hey, can you help solve this problem for me? Or using a thing called MCP integrations, you can say, hey, can you fix issue number 12 for me, for example, and it can go grab the context it needs. It can automatically look at your code base, see what type of code base it is, go do the thing that it thinks you're asking it to do, asking you appropriate questions along the way, and then come back to you, with like, hey, this is it, and run tests and run linting and things and make sure it looks good based on what it sees, and then then you can iterate from there. So you have kind of this you had a very, very tight loop in terms of microseconds. Then with chat, you had a loop in terms of seconds. With agent mode, you have a loop in terms of, seconds to minutes kind of thing is how long it would take. But it's still very iterative. With the coding agent, all that basically is all the experience should feel like is, hey, rather than me sitting and watching VS Code while it codes for me, while Copilot's coding for me, I'm going to background that. I'm going to say, hey, Copilot, create me a pull request that does this, or here's an issue I was going to work on, Copilot. Why don't you make a start on it first for me, please? And then go work on it. And, so we're doing it within the pull request in GitHub. And that's key because you see a lot of these demos where people are like, completely different UI, take a picture of something. Today you have a website. Isn't this great?
Yeah.
Which is great demo. Sadly, that's not how the world works in terms of building stuff. Typically, it's very iterative. It needs to be iterative, actually. And that we found that's a key to success, is actually speeding up the iteration loops. And that's because that's how developers work. It needs to be iterative, and it needs to be focused on, small discrete chunks of work that it can do and then come back to you, and then you can build onto the next thing. So we're hooking into that UI that you're already familiar with, the code review, the pull request,
Right.
doing some work there, and then the AI can come in. You can then review what work Copilot's done. You can just take it as normal, and kind of, take it as the first pass of how it's worked and finish it off. Or you can go, actually, you know what, that's kind of close. Give it some more comments. Okay, it makes some more changes for you. Right, that looks good. It passes all my unit tests. It passes all my, performance tests. Everything is security tests. Everything looks good. Let's merge it and let's ship it. So that's kind of the thing that we showed at Build. And while it's a massive, massive change in terms of how I work, it was fairly incremental in terms of, the progression of steps of how we got there, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
It does. And when you made that announcement, the world was really paying attention. I think everybody talked about it that week. It was definitely all I saw anywhere. And it made me immediately think of, how does GitHub see top engineering teams adapt to this new blend of working? These faster iterative loops require a whole new way of approaching building things.
Yeah. One of the things that concerns me, actually, and we'll talk about why it concerns me, but what I'm finding is the teams that do good DevOps, the teams that already have the guardrails in place to make it so their teams of humans can build quickly and iterate and ship to production reliably and learn from production reliably. Those teams are right now the ones that are best equipped to take advantage of this AI revolution, because they've got the safeguards in place. They've got all the tests. They've got all the, the ability to push to production quickly and learn from production quickly. And so they're the ones that are able to take advantage of AI the most. And to your point, it's accelerating the teams. It's not replacing teams. Like, we need more developers more than ever. But what it is doing is allowing developers to iterate more quickly, which then allows us to put that flow of value to the end user more quickly and then learn from them. You know what I mean? And so that's what we're seeing the high performing teams doing. And there's all sorts of things we can talk about along the way in terms of, best practices, like how you use custom instructions, how you use these tools the most efficiently. But what I hope and what I want us to try and make sure we do as well is allow teams that got left behind in DevOps to kind of take a shortcut to be able to, like, what was stopping them from doing these things in the past. And usually it's one of two things. From a technical side, it's too much technical debt that they've not been able to pay down because they're trying to show value to the customer.
Yeah.
But the other one is cultural, and the cultural one is much harder to address, both in terms of internally in the team, but also the trust you have with your stakeholders, the trust you have with management, that sort of thing. So there's a whole world of things sadly AI can't fix, and that one of those is culture of companies and teams.
Yeah, that's such a great point. That's something that we touch on a lot on Dev Interrupted when we talk with folks building, high performing teams and adopting
Yeah.
new cutting edge software like this is that end of the day, those things they free you up to solve those deeply human problems that are they're next to impossible for AI to really make a dent in. These are things around communication, collaboration, expectations, level setting, understanding where everyone's going, right? And the
Yeah.
AI can't necessarily do that work for you. It can do the steps between, but it requires that really good team understanding. And I like how you framed it as like those teams that had that DevOps culture, that had that practice and had built those processes and understood their bottlenecks and how they worked together as a team. They were already perfectly or really well equipped to
Yeah.
take advantage of all of this acceleration because you're just talking about adding in more iterative loops into a framework that was already agreed upon and understood, right? And so that's a really
And
good
we're
call
set
out
up
that
to
like,
handle
yeah,
continuous delivery at pace,
yeah, exactly.
whereas I've worked places where, there's 9 months between ships kind of thing. And if you're in that kind of world, is AI gonna help you as much there? If you can't, it's about how can we help this speed of iteration, really.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to dive a little bit more into that DevOps parallel with taking
Okay.
advantage of AI and agents. And I'm curious too, just when we learn about how the agents would work and they can kind of work in the background, right? So you get this
Yeah.
like almost like this higher level this higher order of magnitude work that you could possibly delegate and have done. But that
Yeah.
requires like a big shift in how teams like are aligned in their practices through DevOps, how they communicate and coordinate and assign work.
Yeah.
Are there like patterns that you see emerging in teams that are successful in the way that they co-work with an LLM that maybe stands out to you?
Yeah, there's a few different things. One, again, what's fascinating, and we saw this already with like the early versions of Copilot, is that if you wrote better comments, Copilot did a better job for you of coding. And so it kind of tricked you into writing better comments and better interface names and better documentation, because the more context you gave the model, the
Yes.
more it was able to help, kind of thing.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
see a similar thing happening. I mean, it's early days again. We announced it like as we were recording sort of 3 weeks ago. But we'd obviously been dog fooding it for a while and dog fooding it with other teams for a while. What we're seeing is that you spend a bit more time defining your issue, because you find that you're writing it up less as an aid memoir for yourself, but more of like a spec almost, of like
Right.
how what and actually, like this is the whole freaking point of DevOps. Like it's to have that conversation early with the customer of like, so what does this need to do? What happens in these cases? All that stuff we've been doing since TDD and then through Agile and then through DevOps. It
Yes.
just kind of forces you to do that again, because you want to write instructions down in a way that not just you'll get and figure out, but that an AI can help figure out for you. Or a human reviewing that code can figure out for you. So it encourages those kind of best practices. So that's the first thing that we see, which was kind of like accidental, but also cool. It makes me think, oh, maybe this AI is like a good thing. Maybe this is, this is definitely helping. The other one that we see is custom instructions are the secret sauce that not enough people know about yet, and yet the teams that get the most out of Copilot, that's what they're using. It's basically a file you can have at different levels. You can have it like personally in your like local machine. You can have it in the repository, or you can have it at the org level as well. And it's additional instructions that get passed to the prompt as part of every single invocation. And that means that there's a few things. One, you can define a personal style. For example, I make sure all my comments are in British English, and that I add U's in random places to words and
Yeah.
things like this.
Hmm.
I don't use M dash in, like, don't generate comments with an M dash in, because I never use M dash. Like, why would I use M dash in a comment? And some of those sorts of like personal quirks. But more importantly, at a team level, I can specify, hey, when we're using when we're doing a React component, let's stick this. We use a Flagger as our internal feature flagging system, but say you're using something like Launch Darkly or something like this. Like wrap this within this feature flag automatically for me, because that's our coding standard. When you're logging, use this logging framework. When and with examples, and by doing that, it allows the code that's generated by the LLM to not just to reflect where you want to go with your code base, not the crap it finds in your existing code base, because we all know our code bases are currently terrible and we want
Yeah.
to make them better. If an LLM's context is just what it knows from what it's been trained on plus what it can detect from your code, you need to give it additional instructions to also go, and this is where we want to go. This is how we want the future to be with our code base, so that it's continuously improving and continuously making things better. That's probably the main trick I see not enough people have kind of figured out yet, but yeah.
Yeah. There's two things that I want to double click on. I'm going to do them
Okay.
in reverse. And the first one is the one you just talked about with the instructions, because
Yeah.
I want to echo that as a practitioner, someone who's using these tools every day, that like the GitHub Copilot instructions and being able to add that personal style level to what you're prompting, just kind of baked in. It really
Yeah.
helps. It reduces like the iterative cycle of going back
Yeah.
and forth with the LLM. But what it does actually is it forces you to understand what's important and what's not. And then that gets to the main point of what you said. And I think you said so well, something that like has been bouncing around in my head a lot. And you really like nailed it about how AI is kind of in a way tricking us into adopting and revisiting all of these like really great baseline foundational best practices about how to make great software, and doing things like TDD, building a spec that we can all agree on that has the full idea of what's supposed to be accomplished, and really engineering for impact, right? For how folks are going to use your software. And LLMs, they require these guardrails, and so we have to go back to like the basics and really write that stuff out and make sure we're all on that same shared page. So it makes everyone a better developer. And it seems like the key to going fast is to be really strongly aligned with what you're building and using
It's in
things like tools.
communication. Again, that's
Yeah.
why I think the teams that today do DevOps well are getting the most benefit, because the better you can communicate, the better an LLM can understand your intent, and the better it can execute on it. But also, the better your team can understand the intent, the better your customer can make sure you've understood their intent. So communication is key, and it just gets more important with the advance of AI, which again makes me very optimistic against some of the sort of some of the doom and gloom type scenarios and things like that. I'm like, well, if it's tricking us into communicating better and tricking us into having better documentation, and can actually help me create good documentation, and can help me create good tests, and can help my developers who don't speak English as a first language understand requirements that came in English, and they now want to understand them in their language. Like this is all goodness,
Right, exactly. And if it makes us all work better, then that's the direction that we should all go in. And that kind of goes
Yeah.
towards the next topic that I
Yeah.
want to dive into with you about, like the skills that you see emerging for the developer of tomorrow. Like we're moving into a really a new skill set that developers have to
Yeah.
adopt. And this is where it gets really interesting. It's where there's so much opportunity, and it's where like the folks who are listening to us now, people who read and listen to Dev Interrupted, this is what we're all on the cusp of figuring out together as developers, as engineering leaders, of what are the things that I need to do for myself and for my team to make sure that we're upskilling and getting ahead and taking advantage of where this is all going. And in your keynote, you touched really well on like the evolution of LLMs from being like autocomplete to being more multimodal, and then you're moving into an AI native environment. And what you've iterated here today is core to that those teams with strong DevOps practices, they're the ones that are best positioned to take advantage of that. Can you like walk us through like what that would look like in practice for a team, and how leaders could consider maybe revisiting or taking DevOps more seriously so they can mature into this new era?
Yeah, I think if a customer could come to you and explain exactly what it is that they want and how to best implement that with technology, then an LLM could probably do that task entirely on its own, kind of thing. But actually, that's never That's never the case for us. It's like why I love technology so much and why I enjoy it every single day is because we're solving problems. Like it's that creative problem solving, being able to parse apart what a customer is saying and like, okay, so if I did this, this would solve it in the minimum number of steps kind of thing. And this is what computers can do. And then also all those skills you have to build up over years of like how to break down a big the bigger the problem is, the more you need to break it down into small steps so that you can iterate as you go and you can increment and you can make sure you're heading in the right direction. Because what you think is the answer at the macro level definitely isn't the answer when you get down to that small level. So that skill that you already kind of have, but is hard to build, of taking down a big multi-sprint activity into individual day tasks kind of thing that you can get done. You need that skill even more in the world of AI, because if you just give it a big build me one of these things, it's going to try and it'll spend a lot of tokens and it'll spend a lot of like time doing it, but it's more likely to not be exactly what you want, because at any point along that random entropy path that it was doing to help interpolate
Exactly.
what you wanted, it can make a choice and it might make the wrong choice, just like
Yeah.
humans do. And
Right.
so by being able to figure out, okay, how do I break this down? What components do I need? How am I going to create those? And what you do is, you create issues for these, you create pull requests for them. But the major difference is that you learn where to lean on to the AI for assistance. So, hey, well, this sounds like creating me a set of test cases. Well, let's let the AI make the skeleton for that, and then I can go see what Copilot missed and go see what other edge cases I need. And actually, that's now making me think about this problem even more. Let me go talk to the customer to see if this is an edge case or not that I need to take into account. And it just allows you to be more creative and kind of frees you from the typing toil, the implementation toil, and allows you to focus more on the kind of creative problem solving. So you then, as a team, you have to make sure you're building those skills, building the, like, how do we break this down into smaller chunks so that we can then have humans build some parts, Copilot help with other parts, collaboration between Copilot and humans for other parts, sort of thing.
Yeah. Literally eliminate all the typing. I even now prompt my LLMs with voice to text, and so just
Nice.
cut out
That's the advantage of
all
working
of
from
the
home.
typing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
rather
yeah.
than
I mean, I probably do it even when I was in an office. I'll be one of those people. But
Wow.
everyone can just see how they can just see how I blunder through my prompts in the open. We can all learn together. Which actually brings me to another point that I really was curious to know about at GitHub is, how do y'all foster a sense of continuous learning within your engineering team? Because this is like a total like sea change event, and y'all are leading the charge. So how at GitHub do y'all celebrate and create this environment for continuous learning?
Yeah, we call it growth mindset here at GitHub. It's a kind of a term I think a few people use, but it's sort of, we want to be a learn-it-all company rather than a know-it-all company. We want to be consistently learning. Now, luckily, because kind of at the heart of GitHub is the open source community, a lot of people we hire kind of come with that attitude anyway. They assume that somebody out there is smarter than them, and so they can kind of, figure out, like, do some research and figure out what the best way of approaching these things is. That said, like getting we built Copilots. I've been using Copilot since 2021ish. I think I've been using it for a while now. It's like the sixth person to try Copilot in the company.
Wow.
And it was cool, but like going from 6 people using Copilot to the entire engineering org using Copilot didn't happen overnight. What we find with adopting LLM tools is they the Moore's kind of innovation curve, where you have like early adopters, then you have the innovation gap, and then you have early majority, late majority, like all that sort of stuff. That's unlike DevOps deployments, and unlike kind of rolling out TDD in a team or rolling out Agile in a team, which is very much a team by team, one and done kind of way of deploying. With Copilot and I think with all AI tools, it follows this more adoption curve, because individuals have to take the time to start using it in their workflow and start learning how to prompt the AI, learning where Copilot can help. And so you get to 25, the people that listen to the show, they're all early adopters. And
Yes.
so they're the people that are just going to grab Copilot, grab any technology, give it a try, see how it can help. Amazing, because they're listening to the show. But then, like, if you think about all the people that you work with, like, they're busy and they maybe don't want to be trying. They've got an environment that works. They've got work. They've got an
Right.
infinite backlog of work that needs to be done. Like, when am I going to find the time to figure out how to use this, you know? And so helping them find that time and helping them share when they come across something. Like, you've obviously had some amazing moments where, you know, Copilot or other LMs have kind of like surprised and delighted you. Finding a
Yeah.
venue by which people can share those is invaluable inside of a company as well. We have I'll say stuff Copilot did, like, kind of channel where people can share like excitement or like amazement at, like, look at what it just did for me. This is crazy, kind of thing. Because people are going to believe those people a lot more than they're going to believe me saying Copilot is amazing. Of course you think that, you know, you're a VP, you just delete emails all day. You don't really code.
Yeah,
Let me talk to somebody who really codes. Yeah.
So you
So we
create
do
that
some of
space
that.
where they can
So,
share.
yeah,
you know?
so we had to work on getting internal adoption even for us. And took us a while to get to the point where the vast majority of devs are using Copilot inside the organization. So if we did, like, be prepared that as you're building those tools inside your company, you're going to have to do real change management, like help people come along on this journey with you. Because what we see is that people who are using Copilot are, like, the numbers we have, you know, like, what, 50% more effective, they're 80% happier. Like, there's all these ridiculously big numbers that we have from doing surveys and stuff,
Yeah.
which is cool. But then the people who are not using that in your organization, they're going to miss out on that. Like, that's not fair on them either. And they're not missing out on it because they're bad or lazy. They're missing out on it because they're busy and they need the help to get on board, you know? So, so that's one of my biggest thing is be prepared for kind of it being an adoption journey, not an overnight, everyone's going to grab it and do amazingly well tomorrow, you know?
Yeah, no, it's really insightful to hear how, like, GitHub itself is dogfooding and adopting its own tool. And when y'all were doing that process, and obviously you're
Yeah.
still in that process too, because
Yeah.
we're all still figuring out where it's going. Are
Yeah.
there, like, things that you look at to really understand the impact or, like, the productivity or the developer experience gains? Are there, like, go-tos that you really measure as you have adopted this across your org?
Yeah, the primary measure that we take is around, like, code acceptance, like how much people are accepting the suggestions from Copilot and using them. And there's usage as well as another key metric, like, you know, are you a 1 day 28, a 10 day 28, a 28 day 28 kind of user, you know? How many people, like a histogram of where we're seeing that happen inside the business, and then what areas people are using. And other metrics we're looking at are things like, well, that's cool, that's usage, you know? But, like, what's happening to our PR merge times? What's happening to our security vulnerability response times? You know, are we seeing correlative improvements in those alongside the percentage adoption of Copilot that we're seeing? And turns out we actually are. Like, even if I look at across all of GitHub, like every user on GitHub, I can see we introduced, you were talking about getting Copilot into the hands of people. That's one of the reasons why we made a free SKU of Copilot available, so that people can just try Copilot and not have to ask permission. You can just give it a go. When we introduced that, I can see the graphs. I can see, like, this marked increase in the people using Copilot and this marked decrease in globally, not just in GitHub, but globally, the average PR merge time, and also an increase with the amount of PRs being created. Like, it's day and date, like it lines up exactly with that graph of Copilot adoption.
That's cool.
So the PR merge, so it's not just the number of PRs going up is cool, but the size of PRs is going down, and the amount of time it takes to merge a PR is going down. The amount of time it takes to fix a security vulnerability from it being detected is, like, gone from sort of weeks to hours. You know, it's It's ridiculous how much it
Yeah.
speeds people up that way. But again, back to our like old school things, all in positive ways that I wasn't sure at the beginning of this journey. Like, would PR sizes go down? I was a little bit afraid they would go up because now LLMs helping me
Just
write code,
shove
me I'm going to
everything
write monster
in.
PRs. Yeah, exactly. But turns out no, people need to iterate more, and so their PRs actually get smaller. So cool. That seems like a positive thing, but not something that we could have known for certain until we started on the journey. You know?
Yeah, it's almost like the global adoption of the AI that you can see on trends. It helped everybody move into a better development work style because we all know that having smaller, very focused PRs, it's a best practice and being able to iterate on them. You don't want a massive PR that changes like 8 different things. So you see these like best practices get like globally implemented as part of like the LLM adoption. So it makes me excited about like how much more efficient and safer engineering can get in the future as we
Yeah.
continue to like adopt these tools. Which kind of
And I think
brings
that's
us
because of the
to
improvement in communication. Because you
Oh
again
yeah.
now to build, you're having to communicate more. And so because you're communicating with an agent, with with Copilot rather than with another developer, that's what's forcing you to actually make those smaller PRs and things. Because if Copilot gives me a monster like change, I because it's my job on the line if that change breaks. Like I'm the one that's going to
Right.
get called out.
Right.
So Copilot's not going to respond. Well, sometimes it does, but it's not gonna answer the bleeper at 4 a.m. You know what I mean? Like I'm responsible for this code, so I have to do that code review. I have to make sure it's good, and the only way I can do that is if I do smaller PRs and make sure that this code is good. So yeah,
Yeah. It just goes to say that having those fundamentally good best practices is going to help you move faster with these new tools.
I think so.
And it kind of brings us to also to like a larger question of or rather opportunities that I see within like the
Right.
world building new technology, having this like democratization of development with AI
Yeah.
and seeing a boon around things like open source. Martin, you and I both like are from an open source world.
Yeah.
We're both very, very, very pro open source. And
Yeah.
I'm curious to know your perspective on how you see open source contributions and communities evolving in an age of AI enhanced development.
Yeah, one of the things that we make Copilot available. So Copilot is available for free to anybody, but there's limits in terms of like how many requests you make and things like that. So, for a hobbyist or for doing open source work, it's plenty. But then what we also did is we made Copilot available, Copilot Pro, which is our paid SKU. We made that available for free to, it's like over 1 million kind of students, teachers, and maintainers of popular open source libraries, because again we want to just get it in the hands of people to help them improve how they can build open source. So we do that, and what we're actually seeing is people really starting to use it. Like we've started enabling a few projects with the coding agent, and we're sort of scaling that out, and people actually using that, learning how to use it, learning what instructions they need and what actually the improvements they need to make to their builds and tests to then allow Copilot to automatically run the builds and tests, which allow Copilot to make better suggestions and things. Again, better DevOps.
Yeah.
So we see a bunch of that happening. We see the ability to respond to security defects actually dramatically improving from it as well. Because again, from an open source maintainer's point of view, they're busy. They're trying to like build stuff on the weekends and maintain stuff on the weekends. So if there's help available for me to do that, then that's great. And then the other area where it's actually hugely beneficial is code review. So one thing that Copilot can do ridiculously well is tell me what this code actually does, not what the human is telling me it's supposed to do, and then spot the delta. And usually from that helps you with a few ways. One is it sees what the code does and helps find defects, helps find bugs, where it can see what the human's saying they intended and actually what the code does is a delta. This is probably this bit of code that's wrong, like somewhere.
Yeah.
But what it can also do is spot those there's the human says this fixes an important security vulnerability in your library, Mr. Open Source Maintainer. Copilot says this adds a Bitcoin mining wallet stealer or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then the maintainer's like, oh, maybe I need to take a look at this code a bit more than I was going to. And it makes it harder to kind of sneak those things through. So there's
Yeah.
a whole bunch of ways there. I think it can kind of help improve open source. But there is, when we first introduced these tools, we did see it's calmed down a lot now, but early days we did see a spate of actually open source maintainers getting quite a lot of, we politely call them low quality submissions. Some people will call them spam or whatever, but they're not really
Yeah.
spam. They're
Yeah.
usually by well-intentioned people pointing an LLM at a project and saying, do something for me, without the
Mhm.
skill to know if the answer was correct or not, and then submitting it anyway, thinking they were being helpful, kind of thing. And then because, Copilot does a great job, and all LLMs do a great job of like sounding authoritative, like the person sort of, the maintainer's got to review that and take a look and what is it doing? And it's harder to
Parse it.
detect that the thing that this person's coming from isn't as skilled as it might sound like they are based on their PR descriptions and things like this. So we had to do some work there, a bunch of education. Thankfully, things have got a lot better, but it's something that we're definitely, we're being stewards of the open source community. It's something that we're very, very mindful of, is that we don't accidentally overload these maintainers with, we don't make it too easy to overload these maintainers with low quality submissions, kind of thing. So there's a bunch of work happening there to try and help improve that, and like make sure that the tools are helping reduce workload from the open source maintainer and don't add too much workload to them.
Yeah. And one of the last things I want to touch on here is
Yeah.
kind of like that persona of that person who might pick up this tool and not have the coding knowledge or understanding
Yeah.
of the code base, and use the LLM. And the LLM is very authoritative. It's convincing, and it's easy to fall
Yeah.
into this like false trap of understanding what it is that
Yeah.
you ultimately prompted through. And that, like you said, creates friction in some like things like open source projects. It also creates opportunities like for junior developers of actually really understanding what they need to understand in order to have an impact, right? And so in our listenership, we have a lot of active developers, a lot of leaders,
Yeah.
but there's also a lot of like aspirational developers and folks who want
Yeah.
to try and use these tools. And I'm curious, what would you, in your position, say to someone who's maybe more of a junior developer about where they fit into the developer world now and what they should focus on for being the best developer they can be tomorrow?
Yeah, that's great. First of all, a warning to those senior devs. Like I see a lot of snobbishness that goes around. That's like, oh yeah, I can use these LLMs, but that's not for the juniors. That's not for the kids, kind of thing, or whatever. That's not
Yeah.
for the less experienced people, because they're never gonna understand what this stuff is. They're not gonna know how to use it properly. I'm like, no, sorry. The people who are coming on are just as smart as you. They just don't have the experience that you've got. And if you think about like, I've been around, I've got no hair anymore for people that are not watching. Like, I've been around a long time. And when I first came into the difference between when I was building stuff at home as a hobby to when I came into the workplace is that I went from building code that I completely knew inside out, knew everything, and I knew every single line of that code, to being in a code base that was like, just didn't, like, there was bugs in this code base. It was written by other people. It was just did stuff, and like having to understand what this code did. This next round of junior developers are going to be a lot more experienced to that. And to be honest, that's how most of our real work is, because the LLM helps create the scaffold for them, helps create some work. And then they're trying to figure out where it doesn't work. Like, they're trying to figure out the debugging skills. They're trying to figure out all those sorts of things. So actually, in terms of the work that we do, I think they're in an ideal place. In terms of answering your question around like what skills, learning about the different technology stacks, different architectures, learning about what different languages are capable of doing, so that there's less of a barrier now to go from, say, Python to Java, to go from like this amazing, whatever the JavaScript framework is that you're familiar with, to a more recent one, to one that's more appropriate to this particular task that you're using. So the more you can build up your knowledge of what frameworks are out there, what languages are out there, and what are the right types of solutions for these types of tasks, I think you're then better positioned to then be able to guide the AI to give you the right kind of solution, rather than doing what we did as developers, which was, I know how to build one of these. How do I
Right.
solve a problem with what I know how to use? You know what I mean? So, yeah. So it's a great time to be a junior dev, I think. Obviously, bearing in mind like all economy shifts and everything else like that. But in terms of the skills, like if I was a kid now learning to code, or if I was, switching careers and learning to code, the fact that I can like highlight some code and have it explain code to me in my language is amazing. Like I had to order books from the library and wait 2 weeks for them to arrive and then read
Oh,
the
yeah.
books,
Yeah,
Like
and
now
then
you just
those
highlight
books are
code, it
barely
explains.
related to the problem, right? You had to guess of like how that
Yeah,
overlapped,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then you had
exactly.
Stack Overflow where you did the same thing. Oh, how does this person's question actually relate with what I was doing? And so being able to
Yeah.
have that personal answer is incredible.
But
And
but
I
also learning that it's an unreliable narrator, that it's
oh
as
yeah,
fallible a narrator explaining that code to you as a human is. And that then helps you as you're building your career, because I'm sorry, I probably give just as many wrong answers as I give right answers when people ask me questions. And
yeah.
so it helps you build up your internal monologue and your internal skepticism of like, okay, how can I prove this? How can I test this? How can I break this down into small chunks that I can build up that are testable, that are, that I can increment with, kind of thing.
Yeah. I think that's a great way of looking at it. And
Yeah.
so I definitely take that to heart. I completely agree with you. And Martin, we're coming up on our time here, and we've had such an incredible chat about where the future of development is going, how y'all have been building GitHub agents and Copilot, and your own opinions on how DevOps practices are able to kind of accelerate that adoption. I completely agree with them. I know many of our listeners will as well. As we wrap up, where can folks go to learn more about stuff that's top of mind for you? Obviously, everyone knows where to find GitHub, but are there
Yeah.
resources that you want to point them towards that you think are really salient?
The gh.io/copilot, and we'll provide links in the show notes, is a link to
Yeah.
kind of all the Copilot stuff. So you can learn what's new, and then following along with the GitHub socials, so you can kind of, the pace of change is ridiculous. Like we add new
Yeah.
models every week, it feels like. And so keeping up to date with what's shipping is probably key. Folks can also feel free to, we've got a conference coming up called Universe towards, in October timeframe. There'll be a bunch of cool stuff shipping then. There'll be lots of announcements then as well. So I would encourage people to look out for that. And then finally, like martin.social is my Blue Sky handle, but it's also my website that links to all of my socials and things. So people can feel free to just go there and figure out where to follow me if they like a British kind of accented to their tech news, and that's always good as well.
Great. That's awesome. We'll make sure we get all of this in the roundup so folks can go check it out. And GitHub Universe, is that what you said is later in
Yeah.
October, right? Is the big one. Yeah, I'm pretty keen for that one. I'm excited to see what happens. Maybe Dev Interrupted will be at that one too. So I'm
It'd be great to
excited
see
to
you in
see.
person. That'll be amazing.
Yeah, maybe we could do this in person and have
That
like
would
a
be
chat out,
lovely.
because like what you just said, this stuff's going so fast. So
Oh man.
we're going to have to keep talking about it, I think, because there's just so much more to uncover. So folks, thanks for joining us today. This has been a really fun chat. If you enjoyed it, made it all the way this far, you clearly need to like the episode. You need to share it. And you need to subscribe. But more importantly, you need to go on socials and you need to tell people what you thought about today's conversation. You should tag Martin and I. We're both active on places like LinkedIn. It's really easy to find us, contribute to the conversation. We want to know how you're using these tools and what are the conversations we need to have to make it more effective. So thanks for joining us. And as always, stay building, and we'll see you next time.